Hey y'all, welcome back to the Farmer's Table. My name is Jess. If you're new here, I'm really glad you're here. If you're not new here, I'm also glad you're here, though most of you are at least somewhat new because I've only just started this new YouTube channel where I intend to teach you guys all about real food, the part that I know about it, and I'm sure a lot of things we'll learn together. Today I'm going to share a very staple recipe in our house, and I'm going to just show you the basic approach to this, and of course you can jazz it up in all sorts of ways. Today I'm going to share how I roast a chicken, specifically how I spatchcock and roast a chicken. So I've got this really large chicken here that we grew here on our farm. I'm going to be using a really large pan because I have a really large chicken. You can, however, do this in a smaller pan. I learned this method 15 or so years ago, actually before I had ever roasted a whole chicken any other way. This was my introduction into that, and I didn't realize that it was different. I never roasted whole chickens without cutting the backbone out, so it didn't seem to make a very big difference to me until later, whenever I did try a more traditional recipe of roasting a whole chicken as it comes, and I realized how much longer it takes. And with something like a chicken, which chicken meat has a tendency to dry out if it's overcooked, having to roast it a long time to get certain parts up to temp means that parts of the birds are a little more prone to drying out. I don't know about you, but I really don't like eating dry chicken, so I have gone back to primarily spatchcocking. Occasionally I'll roast one whole when I'm going to stuff it with a lot of things in the cavity, but this is my go-to roasting chicken recipe. I will also say, you know, as we dive off into this new channel, especially as we come up close to the holiday season, I'm going to share a lot of my kind of staple recipes with you guys, specifically traditional recipes for Thanksgiving, for Christmas baking, all of that. We don't eat like that most of the time. And even with some of the things that I'll share here on this channel, I will say this, like a simple roasted chicken with whatever seasonal vegetable is coming out of the garden in abundance at that time, is what we eat more often than anything else. In fact, I would say I spatchcock and roast a chicken, I mean, at least once a week, sometimes more than that. And that application goes to making dinner for the family. Sometimes I'll roast a chicken this way whenever I'm going to make chicken and dumplings, or whenever I'm trying to make some meat ahead to put in lunches. If I'm trying to roast a whole chicken to pick the meat off and put it in other recipes, I go ahead and do it this way because it simply cooks faster. I've got my kitchen sink really clean. That's usually how I go about doing this. Just instead of getting something else dirty, I scrubbed the sink beforehand, and I will scrub the sink afterwards. You need a good pair of kitchen shears. This is one of those, if you don't have a lot of kitchen gadgets, like, that's fine, but you need a really good pair of kitchen shears. And you know, you can buy a pretty decent pair for cheap. They're just going to wear out faster, but a lot of times knife makers will sell kitchen shears that are really good. So if you bought your chicken from the store and you open it up, it may have the neck and gizzards inside, and you want to take that out. Get your kitchen shears. You can do this with a knife, just be careful that you don't cut yourself. And you want to cut down one side of the backbone. Alright, as you can see here, I've cut one side of the backbone. If you look up instructions online for how to spatchcock a chicken, you will be instructed to cut the backbone out entirely, which would mean you would repeat that process on the other side of the backbone. I like to make broth with any chicken carcass that I cook. If I just am cooking one like this, I'll just take whatever's left over at the end, bone-wise, the carcass, and I put it in a big 2-gallon Ziploc bag in my freezer until I have 3 or 4 of those, and then I make a pot of broth. With that being the case, I do not cut the backbone entirely out. I cut one side so that I can lay this chicken out flat and cook it flat, but I just leave the backbone attached. It's going to roast. That's going to give it more flavor. Of course, if you cut it all the way out, you could always reserve that uncooked backbone to make broth out of. This is just a matter of preference, but I personally do leave the backbone attached. It's not as pretty. Like, the end product to the bird would be prettier if you took the backbone all the way out, but for me, I'm just feeding this to my family. family and they've seen it 100 times. I'm not that worried about presentation. I primarily use reusable rags and like flour sack towels in my kitchen. I do keep rolls of paper towels for jobs like this so that if I'm dealing with like raw chicken in this case, I can just throw them away. So I'm going to take my bird here, and what I want to do here is flatten it out. I'm going to put some weight on it. And then I want to take some paper towels and dry this bird off. The reason I'm doing this is because I'm about to sear the breast in a pan. And if you have any moisture and you introduce moisture to high heat, you're going to get steam. And when you get steam, things do not get crispy. And I am wanting to sear this so that I have a nice crispy breast on my roasted chicken, which means I need it to be dry. I forgot to mention earlier, my oven is preheated to 400. I will put that in the printable PDF, this recipe. There will be a link down below where you can print it out and put it in your recipe binder so you always have access to it. Let's talk about this pan. All right, this is what we call my manhole size cover cast iron pan. This is a 14-inch Lodge cast iron skillet. I've had it for a really long time. I highly recommend cast iron just because you can't really go wrong with the investment. It is very affordable compared to a lot of cookware, and literally your children's children could be cooking in these pans if everybody down the line considers them valuable and takes care of them. This pan is necessary for that size chicken. However, if you have like a 3 or 4 pound chicken that you got at the store up to maybe like a 5 pound chicken, you can kind of squeeze it in and fit it in a 12-inch cast iron pan. You could cook this recipe on a baking sheet. I really like cooking it in cast iron, and that is primarily what I have done, but I have done it in like a casserole dish. The skin just didn't turn out as well because I wasn't able to sear it in the cast iron. Turn the heat on to like a high medium, and in this pan I'm gonna put about a tablespoon of olive oil as well as about a tablespoon of butter. You can use whatever oil for this. I like doing a mix of the olive oil and butter because I think the flavor is nice. So while that melts on the heat, we're gonna come over here and season this bird. So I'm just gonna season the top side first because when I flip this over into the pan, I'll throw some more seasoning on the back. And I'm gonna take a very, very generous sprinkle of a good salt. This is Celtic sea salt. I heard that this has actually gone like out of stock on a lot of places online because apparently someone on TikTok that had a big following talked about it. I also like Molden flake salt. I like Redmond salt. Just something that is a really high quality salt, really elevates cooking. So I've sprinkled salt on this. Next I'm going to take an equally generous sprinkle of this nice cracked black pepper. This is a coarse pepper. My oil and butter is all nicely melted. My pan is hot, but it's not screaming hot. I don't have anything burning here. If your butter starts burning, don't put your food in that because it's going to make it taste better. And I'm going to take this chicken and put it breast side down. Alright, I just ran and washed my hands real quick. And now on the back of the chicken, I'm just going to put another sprinkle of salt. This is mostly just going to flavor the pan juices. When you first put meat in a hot pan, you want to wait for at least 30 seconds before you move it at all. Ideally, what will happen whenever you have a well-seasoned cast iron pan or a non-stick pan, or even a stainless pan that has a good deal, like it has oil in it, when you put something on it like this chicken, the initial sear starts to happen, meaning that skin is starting to cook. And while that skin is cooking, the fat that's behind it is starting to render, like the beginning of the sear develops. It sort of releases its hold from the pan. And so you really want to wait like 30 seconds so that sear can really set in before you move it at all. But I'm actually going to let this sit here for about 3 minutes. It should be enough. Now if you stuck this chicken in your pan and it was way too hot, and it like sizzled like super loud and super, you know, it's popping everywhere and all that stuff, maybe take a little peek at it before 3 minutes, just to make sure that it's not scalding. I know that this wasn't insanely hot, but there have been many times that I put that oil on and I'm running around doing other things, and by the time I get back to it, it's a little overheated. And we just had really crispy skin that night. All right, 3 minutes later, point this down so you guys can see. Turn it. I always just grab this with my hands here on the back where it's not touching, so it's not terribly hot. And flip it over. So I wasn't actually trying to cook anything here. I'm just trying to get a sear. This is a really big bird. The skin had kind of come down, so it's not going to be the prettiest specimen, but that's what I'm looking for. Now I'm going to stick this in that 400-degree oven. Normal sized bird, like what you would expect to go buy at the grocery store, 4-ish pounds, you can cook a spatchcock chicken in like 40 to 45 minutes. Being that that chicken is so large, I'm kind of anticipating it taking an hour at least. I'm going to set the timer for 50 minutes just to see where I'm at that point, and I'm going to temp the meat with a meat thermometer. This is one of those things, ooh, I forgot to turn this on. This is one of those things that if you have a limited budget, but you're looking for kitchen tools, a meat thermometer to me is pretty dang non-negotiable. I'm a good cook. I've been cooking for 20 years, very consistently feeding a family for that long. I would be lost without a meat thermometer. Like, I could probably wing it and probably get it pretty close at this point, just based on how things feel, and there are different tricks you can do to like feel the texture. I could easily overcook things. That would be the way I would swing. I would swing to cooking them a little longer than I thought was necessary, just to make sure that they're fully done. And then in the case of chicken, if you overcook it, it's dry and it's not good, it's gross. So we really want to make sure that we are temping the meat and that the center of the breast is 165 degrees when we're ready to pull this out of the oven. I'm going to check it in about 50 minutes. I suspect that will not be nearly enough time because that is a really large bird, but that's when we're going to look in on it again. While I wait for this chicken to cook, I'm going to make a little dipping oil. First, I'm going to take a few cloves, and by a few I mean like 5. Anytime like 3 cloves of garlic are called for, I do 5. Can you really have too much garlic? So what I do with these is take the flat side of a knife, mash them down. That's when I go ahead and peel the papery outside off, is after I've mashed it. I'm going to put them in this bowl. The recipe for this dipping sauce came from this cookbook. It's called Mad Hungry, Feeding Men and Boys. This was the cookbook that I learned to cook from 15 or so years ago. To these crushed cloves, I'm going to add about 3 tablespoons of good olive oil. All right. And 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. I do think that it would be better to use fresh lemon juice. I just don't have any, so we're just going to go with what we have. And a good healthy pinch of red pepper flakes. Right here in this, if you like heat, a nice pinch of cayenne pepper goes well too. And you can put multiple herbs in this. This is kind of like a dressing. In fact, you could potentially whip this up and dress a salad with it. Like this is more or less just a dressing that we're making. We're calling it dipping oil because we're going to dip meat in it, but you could use it in multiple ways. Now we're just going to whip this. Whenever you add any sort of acid to oil and whip it together, you get what's called emulsification, which is when these ingredients, oil and lemon juice, can somehow become creamy, like the texture of it becomes creamy, and that's what happens here. So you can see this is the emulsified olive oil and lemon juice. As I said, I mean, you could make something just like this and dress a salad with it. You could make an oil, a dipping oil like this, and put it on any sort of meat, any sort of roasted vegetables, potatoes. Potatoes are really good dipped in this. I like to make this as soon as I put the chicken in the oven so that all of these flavors can marry and we can enjoy it with the chicken whenever it comes out. Another thing is taste as you go. One thing I do that's not called for in this recipe is I do put like a pinch of salt in this. That's because I'm Southern and we salt the heck out of everything. So That's good. 50 minutes later, we're gonna pull this out and take a peek at it. Honestly, if I were cooking this not on camera, I would just temp it right here in the oven, but I'm gonna pull it out so you guys can see what's going on. I do not expect that this is gonna be done right now. I could be wrong. I've been wrong before, but I think I'm probably not wrong. Oh, she's pretty. So I don't like to like temp a lot just because you're poking a hole in meat, which right now, while the juices are all hot and steamy, poking a hole in the meat means that they can run out. Let's see. It's close, but it's 147 degrees and we want 165 in the breast for a fully cooked chicken. So I'm gonna put it back in the oven for another 12 minutes. That's me just stabbing in the dark based on my experience. I don't know if there's like an actual formula for like how many degrees per minute, I don't know, but I'm gonna put it back in the oven. I temped at 12 minutes and I was still just a little bit under temp, so I went back in for another 6 minutes. So it's now 18 minutes later, which I fully anticipated this actually taking a little over an hour. This is about what I had estimated it was going to take. And I think, well, I'll be up to temp now. Oh, look at that. Sounds good. Smells good. Jackson just came in from the gym and he walked in the door and said, something smells really good in here. All right, let's go into the deepest part without hitting bone, and we are at 166. That is perfect. So one thing that is really important whenever we are cooking meat, when it comes out of the oven and it has reached temperature, we now want to leave it alone. If you are roasting any cut of meat, always let it rest for at least 5 minutes after you bring it out of the heat. Right now, all the juices in that chicken are like boiling hot, and we want to let it rest so that they'll redistribute. So if we ever were to cut into this chicken right now, a lot of that juice would just run out, and then my leftovers would be dry. So for the sake of good leftovers, though, this is one chicken. I have 5 sons that are gonna eat this. There's not gonna be any leftovers, but either way, we want to let it rest. So one thing I do when my spatchcock chicken comes out of the oven is I take about a tablespoon of butter and I drop it into the pan to let this melt and mix in with all of these delicious pan juices. If I had fresh lemons, I would squeeze a lemon in here, but I don't, so I'm just going to put a little bit, just a tiny splash of lemon juice. And once I start cutting this chicken up, I'm actually going to scrape up all of this delicious goodness that's in the pan. There's so much concentrated flavor here that I'm going to serve over top of the meat. What I will typically serve this with, if I'm just roasting a chicken to go with dinner, I will serve this with potatoes, maybe a fresh salad, some cooked down fresh veggies out of the garden. I am going to sneak in here and get one little bite. I'm going to go in here on the thigh. I like dark meat. It's my favorite. I want to get this good crispy skin, dip it in those pan juices, and of course in my dipping sauce. All right, it's gonna be hot. This is sincerely the best chicken. I mean, not this particular chicken, this method of cooking chicken with this particular dipping sauce is my favorite chicken I've ever had. My friends and family call this Jess chicken when I make this for them. This particular combination, they call it Jess chicken. It's so stinking good. I love it so much. When I went carnivore, I would cook this and cut it into quarters and eat this throughout the week. This is definitely a staple in our house. I think it will be until the end of time. I would love it if you guys would try this and let me know what you think. Again, I do this even when I'm planning on just picking it clean. Like if I were gonna make chicken salad, I need to roast a chicken. This is how I would roast it. If I were gonna make chicken and dumplings, this is how I would roast it. You just get so much flavor. You get such a nice crisp skin with so much of the skin facing up, rather than if you were to leave the backbone in and roast the chicken whole. Part of it would stay really soggy. I just think this is the way to do it. Thank you guys for hanging out with me today and all the days you do. God bless you. Until next time.